There is something about Keanu Reeves that makes you stop and pay attention. In a world filled with celebrities who chase fame and fortune, he walks a different path. He gives away millions to film crews without seeking praise. He takes pay cuts so other actors can be hired. He sits alone on park benches sharing his food with strangers. He rides the subway like everyone else. He treats every single person with genuine respect, from studio executives to the person cleaning the floors. When I think about what it means to be truly kind, truly humble, and truly human, I think about Keanu Reeves. His story reminds me that fame does not have to change who you are at your core. And today, I want to share with you a moment that captured everything beautiful about this man, a moment that touched millions of hearts around the world. The air inside the theater felt different that night. It carried a weight that no one could name, a quiet tension that seemed to settle into the velvet seats and linger beneath the golden chandeliers. The lights had not yet dimmed, but already there was a strange stillness, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Somewhere near the front, a man sat alone, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on something no one else could see. He looked calm on the surface, the way he always did, but there was something stirring beneath that stillness. Anyone who truly knew him would have recognized it immediately, that almost invisible tremor in his jaw, that distant look that spoke of memories too heavy to carry alone. Keanu Reeves had attended hundreds of premieres throughout his career. He had walked countless red carpets, smiled for thousands of cameras, and answered the same questions more times than he could count. But tonight was different. Tonight, he was not just presenting a film to the world. He was opening a door to something deeply personal, something he had protected for decades with fierce privacy. And as he sat there in the growing silence, he could not stop glancing at the empty seat beside him. That seat had been reserved for someone special. Someone whose absence had shaped him in ways the public would never understand. Someone whose presence tonight would mean more than any award or accolade he had ever received. His mother. To understand the weight of that empty seat, you need to understand the journey that led to this moment. Keanu had grown up in a world of constant motion. His father had abandoned the family when Keanu was barely 3 years old, leaving behind nothing but confusion and unanswered questions. His mother, Patricia, had done everything in her power to provide for her children. She worked as a costume designer in the rock music industry, traveling with legendary bands, creating elaborate outfits for concerts that dazzled audiences around the world. But her work demanded sacrifice. It meant long absences, late nights, and a childhood for Keanu that was filled with moving boxes and unfamiliar bedrooms. They moved constantly. Different cities, different schools, different faces that never stayed long enough to become friends. Keanu learned early how to adapt, how to become invisible when necessary, how to find comfort in his own imagination. But somewhere along the way, a distance grew between mother and son. It was not born of hatred or cruelty. It was born of survival, of two people doing their best in impossible circumstances and slowly losing sight of each other in the process. As Keanu grew older and his acting career began to take shape, the distance only widened. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rarer. There were misunderstandings that never got resolved, words left unspoken that hardened into walls. Patricia watched her son become famous from afar, proud beyond measure but convinced that she had no place in his new world. She told herself that he was better off without reminders of the unstable childhood she had given him. She told herself that her presence would only bring pain. And Keanu, carrying his own wounds, his own interpretation of those difficult years, let the silence grow. He threw himself into his work. He built a reputation as one of the kindest people in Hollywood, treating strangers with a warmth and generosity that seemed endless. But when it came to his mother, there was a door he could not seem to open. The hurt was too old, too tangled, too complicated to untangle. Years passed. nearly 3 years of almost complete silence between them. And then came the phone call that changed everything. Keanu was filming overseas when his phone rang in the middle of the night. An unfamiliar voice informed him that his mother had been hospitalized. She had been diagnosed with a serious illness, and the doctors were not optimistic. But what broke Keanu was not the diagnosis itself. It was what the voice said next. "She says she understands if you cannot come." Those words echoed through his mind during the entire flight home. What kind of mother feels she needs to give her own son permission to stay away? What kind of distance had he allowed to grow between them that she would expect him not to come? The guilt was overwhelming, but beneath the guilt was something else. Something that felt like waking up from a long and terrible dream. When he walked into that hospital room, he did not know what to expect. He found a woman who looked smaller than he remembered, thinner, more fragile. But her eyes still held that same spark of fierce independence that had carried her through decades of hard work and harder choices. She looked up at him, and for a moment neither of them could speak. "You came," she whispered. "I am sorry it took so long," he replied. And then, for the first time in more years than he could count, Keanu allowed himself to cry in his mother's presence. Not the controlled tears of a man who had learned to hide his emotions, but the raw, shaking sobs of a son who had finally come home. The months that followed were a journey of healing that neither of them had expected. Keanu rearranged his entire schedule to be with Patricia during her treatments. He sat beside her during chemotherapy sessions, holding her hand, reading poetry aloud when she was too tired to talk. They spent countless midnight hours untangling the misunderstandings that had kept them apart. They laughed about memories they had almost forgotten. They cried about wounds they had never properly acknowledged. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt what had been broken. And during this time, Keanu made a decision. He was working on a new film, a deeply personal project that had been years in development. He decided to weave real footage of his reconciliation with Patricia into the narrative. Not exploitatively, but with her full knowledge and blessing. This film would be his gift to her, a public declaration of the love he had failed to express for so many years. The premiere arrived. The theater filled with celebrities and critics and industry insiders. Cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. But Keanu could focus on only one thing: the empty seat beside him. Patricia had promised she would come. Her doctors had given her permission, cautiously optimistic about her progress. But as the minutes ticked by and the lights began to dim, doubt crept into Keanu's heart. What if she had changed her mind? What if she felt she did not belong in this world of glamour and fame? What if the distance between them, despite everything, was still too great to cross? The film began. Keanu sat motionless, barely registering the images on the screen. The first act unfolded, and the audience began to realize they were watching something unexpected. This was not a typical Hollywood production. Intercut with the fictional narrative were real moments, raw and unpolished footage of Keanu sitting beside a hospital bed, of whispered conversations and shared tears, of a mother looking into the camera and speaking words she had waited a lifetime to say. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Critics leaned forward in their seats. Celebrities exchanged glances of disbelief. Was this real? Was Hollywood's most private star actually revealing his heart to the world? And then, 43 minutes into the film, the door at the back of the theater opened. A shaft of light cut through the darkness, and a small figure appeared in the doorway. Patricia stood there, wearing a simple blue dress, her silver hair catching the glow from the screen. She looked uncertain, almost frightened, suddenly aware of 3,000 pairs of eyes turning toward her. Keanu saw her immediately. Without a moment of hesitation, without any thought for the cameras or the watching world, he rose from his seat and began walking up the aisle. The whispers intensified. Phones appeared despite the strict no recording policy. But Keanu noticed none of it. His entire focus was on the woman standing alone in that doorway, the woman who had given him life, who had done her imperfect best in impossible circumstances, who had never stopped loving him even when that love had nowhere to go. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "I did not know if I should come," she whispered. "I thought maybe I would disrupt everything." "You should be sitting," he said gently. "Please, Mom. Take my seat." The walk back down the aisle seemed to take forever and no time at all. Keanu matched his pace to hers, his hand steady at her back, guiding without hovering. When they reached the VIP section, celebrities began rising from their seats, offering their spots, suddenly ashamed to be sitting while this woman stood. But Keanu shook his head at all of them. He guided Patricia to his own seat, the center seat, the best seat in the house. She looked up at him with confusion and wonder. "But where will you sit?" she asked. "I will stand," he replied. "I have sat through too many things in my life while you stood alone. Tonight, it is my turn." What happened next would be remembered for years to come. One person in the audience began to stand. Then another. Then another. Like a wave building momentum, the entire theater rose to its feet. Not at the end of the film, not during a climactic scene, but right there, in the middle of the premiere, as Keanu Reeves stood beside his seated mother. 3,000 people, standing in tribute to a moment of pure humanity. Patricia looked around, overwhelmed by the applause, by the tears on so many faces, by the unexpected grace of being seen. "What is happening?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why are they standing?" "They see you, Mom," Keanu said quietly. "They finally see what I should have seen all along." The film continued, but something had fundamentally shifted in that room. When the credits finally rolled, they included a dedication that made the entire audience catch their breath. "For Patricia, who taught me that love does not require perfection. It only requires presence. I am sorry I took so long to understand. I am here now. Your son." But the evening was not finished. Patricia, still seated in that place of honor, slowly rose to her feet. She turned to face the audience, these strangers who had just witnessed the most intimate chapters of her life, and she began to speak. "I made many mistakes," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I worked too much. I moved us too often. I was so focused on providing things that I forgot to provide presence. When my son became famous, I convinced myself he was better off without me. I thought my presence would only remind him of everything he had to overcome. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." She paused, gathering her strength. "These past months, watching my son sit beside my hospital bed, reading me poetry at 2 a.m, refusing to let me give up, I learned something important. Kindness is not about being perfect. It is about showing up anyway. It is about saying I am sorry even when you are not sure you will be forgiven. It is about giving your seat to someone who needs to rest when you have the strength to stand." She turned to Keanu, her eyes bright with tears. "You did not just give me your seat tonight. You gave me back my dignity. My hope. My belief that broken things can still be made whole. I love you. I should have said it more. I should have said it every single day. But I am saying it now, in front of all these witnesses. I love you, and I am so proud of the man you have become." The applause that followed was unlike anything that theater had ever witnessed. It was not the polite appreciation of entertainment. It was something deeper, something sacred, the sound of human hearts recognizing a truth they had always known but rarely seen demonstrated. In the days that followed, video of that moment spread across the world. Millions watched the grainy footage of Keanu standing beside his seated mother, their joined hands barely visible in the darkness. The response was overwhelming. People shared their own stories of estrangement and reconciliation. Sons and daughters who had been silent for years picked up their phones and made calls they had been avoiding. Parents wrote letters to children they had lost contact with. A movement emerged around a simple idea that it is never too late to show up, to stand for someone else, to give your seat so another can rest. And what strikes me most about this story is how small the gesture seems on the surface. Standing up, offering a seat, walking slowly beside someone who needs your support. These are not grand heroic acts. They will not make headlines on their own. But when they come from a place of genuine love, when they represent the end of years of silence and the beginning of healing, they become something extraordinary. Keanu Reeves has given the world so many memorable performances. He has played heroes who save cities and warriors who fight against impossible odds. But perhaps his most important role has been the one he plays off-screen. The role of a man who treats every person with dignity. The role of a son who found his way back to his mother. The role of a human being who understands that true strength is not about power or fame. It is about kindness. It is about humility. It is about standing when someone else needs to sit. We live in a world that often tells us to look out for ourselves first. We are taught to compete, to climb, to claim our seat at the table before someone else takes it. But this story reminds us that the most powerful thing we can do is sometimes the simplest. It is giving up our seat. It is making room for someone else. It is choosing presence over perfection and showing up even when we are not sure we will be welcomed. If there is someone in your life you have been meaning to call them today. If there are words you have been afraid to say, find the courage to say them. If there is a seat you have been holding onto too tightly, consider giving it away. Because in the end, we are not remembered for the seats we occupied. We are remembered for the moments we stood so someone else could rest. We are remembered for the love we had the courage to express. We are remembered for showing up. And that is the lesson Keanu Reeves has taught us all. Not through speeches or grand declarations, but through a simple act of standing up and giving his seat to his mother. An act of kindness that touched millions of hearts and reminded the whole world what it truly means to be human.